Please like the video, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. Your support keeps long-form reporting like this alive, and it helps more people see stories that matter. Now, to the heart of it. For generations the monarchy has sold us an image of unshakable calm, the same portraits, the same balcony, the same careful choreography of carriages and bugles. But institutions, like families, are powered by people, and people carry history in their bones. What we're seeing now is not a tidy subplot, it's a collision of memory, strategy, illness, and expectation. Palace officials can say there's no rift, that this is just robust discussion, and perhaps in a technical sense that's true. Yet the tempo of the briefings, the timing of off-record denials, and the very subjects being debated, Harry, Andrew, Sarah Ferguson, and the future footprint of the crown, tell a different story. Two men who love the same institution are pulling on different levers to secure it. Start with Balmoral. The Scottish retreat has always been where hard talk hides inside soft scenery, where a brisk walk over heather substitutes for a boardroom table. The latest father and son meeting was framed as a catch-up, an heir's check-in with his sovereign. But the agenda, by all accounts, reached into the sorest places. The king, newly attuned to fragility after a difficult year of treatment and recovery, is said to be leaning into reconciliation, especially where his younger son is concerned. The Prince of Wales, by contrast, is described as flinty, future-focused, allergic to repeating the 1990s, and convinced that loose ends become loose threads that can unravel an entire garment. These are not caricatures, they are temperaments forged by different decades. Charles endured a public dismantling of his first marriage and spent half a lifetime persuading the country to accept Camilla as queen. William came of age in the blast radius of that era and has built a private life engineered against chaos. Each man learned a lesson, each lesson points in a different direction. The first fracture line is Harry. As a father, Charles's instinct is obvious and human: make space, keep the door on the latch, move toward peace before time steals the chance. As a future monarch and as a brother who absorbed every headline about Oprah interviews, Netflix disclosures, podcasts, and a bestseller that mapped private rooms, William's calculus is harder. He sees reputational drag, recurring cycles of disclosure, and the way even a single photograph can be recoded as palace rapprochement and then used, fairly or not, as leverage in the next chapter. It's not that he believes reconciliation is morally wrong, it's that he believes the price could be institutional confusion at precisely the moment the crown needs absolute clarity about who is in, who represents, and who is responsible for what. When he talks carefully about not returning to past practices that he and his brother grew up inside, he's signaling a doctrine as much as a grievance. Boundaries are policy now, not just preference. The second fracture line is the York question. The Epstein scandal is not a news cycle, it is a stain, renewable every time a fresh tranche of details or an old email becomes newly visible. Andrew's withdrawal from public life and removal of military affiliations were supposed to be the firewall. But the issue refuses to stay contained because the narrative is larger than titles. It's about judgment, proximity, and the impression that the firm tolerates risk when it should prefer distance. In that context, Sarah Ferguson's supreme friend wording, whatever the context of fear or pressure, was not just unfortunate, it detonated every argument for carefully managed proximity. William's position, reported widely, is stark. The crown cannot afford ambiguity here. A clean break is not cruelty, it is institutional hygiene. This is where the king's long view complicates everything. He knows that exiles can become authors, and authors can become arsonists. The monarchy's greatest enemy is not controversy, it is sustained narrative warfare from within. Charles's instinct, shaped by decades of bruising experience, is to cage the risk, not feed it. Keep people close enough that they don't feel cornered, far enough that they don't damage the brand, and above all reduce the oxygen available to escalation. It's a strategy of patience, sometimes read as softness, sometimes as cunning. William's instinct is cleaner, faster, more legible to a generation that prizes consequences. Draw a line, hold it, and don't spend tomorrow apologizing for yesterday. Both approaches have logic. Both carry risk. Put them in the same drawing room and you have a philosophy seminar conducted in whispers. Now layer on top the public words that ignited private heat. In his conversation with Eugene Levy, William was unusually open about family, pressure, and that vow not to replicate the mistakes he watched as a child. He spoke about dinner tables without phones, about safety, security, love, about an atmosphere you build inside your own four walls to counter the weather outside. He did not name names. He did not point fingers. But in a family where history is never truly past, even the gentlest critique of old practices can sound to an older ear like a judgment on a father's long journey from scandal to acceptance. For a man who has spent years protecting Camilla's standing and carefully smoothing the narrative of their shared reign, hearing his heir reflect publicly on what not to repeat could cut deeper than the speaker intended. That is the hazard of candor. It offers comfort to the public and discomfort to the people you love most. The consequence, if the leaks are accurate, has been a period of icy quiet, no calls, no texts, just the hum of intermediaries trying to sand down sharp edges. Trust, once dented, is slow to buff back to sheen, and the royal timetable is cruel to feelings. There is always another engagement, another audience, another foreign dignitary whose handshake expects harmony at the top. Courtiers can stage photographs, they cannot stage confidence. Yet beneath the frost there is a pragmatic motive to repair. Everyone in that house knows the cost of a visible breach between sovereign and heir. It gives oxygen to speculation, license to caricature, and an opening to anyone who wants to describe the crown as a dynasty of feuds rather than a machine of service. What makes this moment feel heavier than a routine father-son disagreement is the overlay of succession planning with agenda setting. William has not hidden that he intends to be a builder of systems, Earthshot as a template, early years as a through line, homelessness tackled with measurable pilots instead of photo-op pity. He uses phrases like change for good, then wraps them in breaks like not overly radical, telegraphing a method, iterate, don't explode, scale, don't sermonize. Charles's first phase as king has prioritized continuity under pressure, ceremonial accuracy, and a gradual green refit of the physical and cultural estate. These are not opposites so much as different speeds. But speed differentials cause friction, and friction inside a palace, where silence is the default, often expresses itself through planted adjectives: impatient, overcautious, soft, unyielding. Translate those words and you often find love protecting itself with armor. There is also the context every viewer can map onto their own life, the year that makes you redefine what matters. William called 2024 the hardest of his life. He named the tests, then praised the way his children adapted and his wife and father endured. That is not the voice of a man drunk on radicalism. It is the voice of someone who watched the floor tilt and decided his house would be built with double joists. When such a person talks about not going back to past practices, he's talking about public habits and private hygiene. The media carnival of the late 20th century taught him what relentless intrusion does to the nervous system. The past year taught him what illness does to perspective. The policy that flows from those lessons will look uncompromising. But inside the policy you will find a parent's heartbeat. Where does this go? Likely toward a negotiated coexistence, a king who continues to seek settlement where it serves stability, and an heir who continues to insist on bright lines where ambiguity threatens the brand. The peace to aim for isn't sentimental, it's procedural. It looks like agreed protocols for who appears when and with whom, like a hard calendar that prioritizes institutional work over family theater, like a quiet rule that personal reflections happen in formats that make space for context, not clipped into weapons by editors hungry for friction. It also looks like a clearer York policy that every stakeholder can point to when questions return, as they will. Do not expect a joint interview, a staged walkabout, or a confessional fireside that delivers catharsis on demand. That is not the Windsor way when the stakes are this high. Expect instead carefully synchronized duties that demonstrate alignment without demanding intimacy. Expect speeches that echo each other's themes: service, environment, early years, with enough overlap to signal unity and enough difference to preserve dignity. Expect the family to let the work carry the narrative. It is slower than spectacle, and less satisfying to those who crave plot twists, but it is how this institution survives storms. Tempo, not tantrum. There is a sober lesson here for anyone who cares about the crown as a living thing rather than a museum piece. The monarchy does not need perfect people at the top, it needs disciplined ones. Charles's discipline is endurance, Hold the line, sand the edges, forgive where possible, absorb the blow, carry on. William's discipline is boundary. Define the line, hold the standard, prevent the blow, carry forward. Tension between those disciplines is inevitable. The outcome need not be rupture if both sides recognize the virtue in the other's method. A crown that only forgives risks eroding its standards, a crown that only enforces risks eroding its humanity. The balance is brutal work. But the family has a blueprint, a grandmother who made patience a sacrament and a father who turned chastening into craft. The heir can add the modern muscle of measurable impact without mistaking hardness for strength. So where should public empathy land? With the father whose private wounds are easily scraped by public remarks, or the son who believes the best gift he can give the institution is a version of himself that never again has to relive his childhood's worst chapters? The honest answer is both. This is the tragedy of succession in a transparent age. The moments that would once have been contained by oak doors now refract through lenses and timelines until they look like ideology rather than family. Strip away the glare and you find something recognizable. Two men trying to love the same thing well, believing different tactics will save it. What happens next will be decided in rooms with no microphones. If the intermediaries are wise, they will stage opportunities for untheatrical agreement, shared briefings, joint patronage updates, private debriefs after difficult days so that muscle memory can replace brittle feelings. They will also engineer space. Distance is not doom, it can be medicine. Let the king continue to embody reassurance to older constituencies who crave steadiness. Let the heir prototype the next decade's delivery mechanisms for service. Then let results, not rumors, do the talking. If the numbers move, funding won, project scaled, problems measurably dented, the story will align itself because success is the only narrative the crown can afford to amplify. This deserves your view, too. Should the prince push harder for clean breaks and major updates, even at the cost of family peace? Or should the king continue to privilege cautious reconciliation, even at the cost of frustrating a modernizer's timetable? Tell us in the comments. Thoughtful debate is welcome here. And if you value reporting that treats the people inside the pictures as human beings navigating impossible trade-offs, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss our next analysis. We'll keep watching, carefully and without hysteria, as the House of Windsor tries to do what every family must eventually do: turn pain into policy, memory into method, and love into something that lasts.